Hi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have my October wrap up and my November TBR. I am combining these two because the videos separately have gotten shorter and I am trying to figure out a better schedule as my life and my priorities sort of shift, and it seemed to fit to put both of these together. So let's start with the wrap up. Again, I'm not going to go through all of the detailed stats. I'm going to have a separate end of the year stats focused video, which I may combine with my top 10, I may not. But as of October 29th, when I am filming this book, I have read 24 books, which is not too shabby. I probably will get through maybe two more, at least maybe one audiobook and finishing the physical book that I'm in the middle of. So I may end up October at 26 books finished, which is a huge number for most people, but a little bit off par from what I've been reading recently, as evidenced by my lull at the middle of the month. And I also did not get through the TBR that I set for October. I never made a Storygraph TBR. Didn't want to feel pressured by that. I rearranged the order that I was listening to a lot of things. So even though I had a lot of audiobooks, I prioritized some of the SESL and ARC copies that I had audiobook copies of, to say the same word twice. And thus I did not get to a few of my books, and that's totally fine with me because I'm shifting away from that, because the few months that I did that endeavor, that series, I made some really good decisions, and I will be continuing to think about that as I go forward. And I think that was a good experiment, but I'm not going to focus on those, especially as we come to the end of the year when we get the Goodreads Choice Awards, which I will be talking about more in just a moment. All that being said, I've read a variety of genres here, obviously mostly fantasy, but I have two nonfiction, I have several historical fiction, and I have several science fiction actually as well. I had a good mix of physical and audio. Most of my physical reading actually page-wise would probably be graphic novels, but that's because of the two Lore Olympus books that I read at the end of the month. That being said, let's get into the books by rating. And I have several that I am just going to mention. I'm not going to pop the covers on the screen because that would take way too long in editing for the amount of time that they'll be displayed. I did not have anything lower than a 3-star, although a couple of my 3 stars just barely got enough points on Compile to be 3 stars. So, and I felt middling about them, so I felt okay with leaving them as 3 stars. One of them was the last of the SESL books that I read, and that is She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quinlan. The next of those is Ultra Laser, the graphic novel that I read a previous weekend, like the third weekend in October, just to get pages in. And A Million to One by Adiba. I think it's I'm not going to try. I had an idea, but then at the time I tried to say it, it went out of my head. This is a TBR book, and I mentioned in that Book Box Battle video that I was going to give them the last one, as a last chance, but then I was reading this after I filmed that video and went, gee, nope, and I already canceled that. So those are my 3 stars. I actually don't have any 3.5 stars either. My next is 4 stars, and I had a lot of 4 stars. And for me, a 4-star book is one that was good. Maybe not super memorable, but it was enjoyable and it was a pleasant time reading. And so for those, I had several of my e-arcs that I had as audiobook copies, and it helped me bring down that number. That's definitely going to be a focus in 2024. I had Murder at a London Finishing School, which turned out to be book 7 in a series, and I didn't realize it. We Still Belong, which was a short middle grade book, and I believe it was in verse, but I listened to it as audiobook, so I don't know if it was verse or not. We have Ellie Engel Saves Herself by Leah Johnson, and Totally Psychic, for the ones where I didn't list the authors because I don't remember. So those, all 4 were actually arcs that I received on NetGalley, but didn't get around until I had a audiobook copy, meaning they were already published. The physical books that I have that were 4 stars are The House at the Edge of Magic. This, I believe, was my Buzzwordathon book for the month. Then we have Under the Blood Red Sun, which was the book that I used to finish a series. And then we had Jade City, which was the book to start a series. And out of my 4-star books, I definitely would rank this one higher. Then we come to what by far is the largest stack. And that is my 4.5-star reads. And that includes several that I do not have physical copies of. I think 4.5-star has become my go-to for a book that is really, really good, but it's not like mind-blowing. I think I've become a little bit more stingy with the 5 stars. We shall see. So of the 4.5-star books that I do not have physical copies of, 2 are SEASL books, 1 is an e-arc. That one is Fatima Tate Takes the Cake. The SESL books, which I will talk more about in my second to last episode, I'm going to talk about 16 books total instead of doing an episode 4 and an episode 5, and then I'll do a wrap-up video. But those are Every Single Lie and Look of the Titanic. Here comes the actual physical copies of my 4.5-star reads. We have Squire and Knight by Scott Chandler. This is definitely a success in the Kids Comics subscription. Then we have the first of the 2 nonfiction books that I had this month, and that is Defying the Odds, Triumphant Black Women of Newark by Barbara J. Kukla. Then we had Dragon Pearl by Yoon-Ha Lee. I believe this was one of my 23 and 23 books. Then we had The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson, the last of the Secret Projects. Next we had Godkiller by Hannah Kaner, a fantastic surprise. This was my Illumicrate book, and definitely the book that kind of saved Illumicrate this year. Next we had Ariadne, which was my book of the month book for this month, and 2 books that I bought at the end of October, and they helped me with my page count. That is Lore Olympus volumes 4 and 5. That's a lot of 4.5-star reads. I've had a pretty good reading month. Before I get to my 2 5-star reads of the month, I will acknowledge that I haven't rated this one yet at the time of filming. I'm about half an hour away from finishing this. This is probably going to end up as a 2.5-star. It might just eke out above a 3-star, but I forgot to talk about that at the very beginning of the ratings. And that was my other nonfiction for the month. Now we have my 5 stars. Of those, I do not have one physically. I have put it on my wish list though, and that is an SESL book, and that is Worst Case Colin. That was absolutely phenomenal and took me completely by surprise. And then the other one, I just filmed my recent reads, which is going to go up after this video, and I mistakenly thought that I rated this 4.5 stars. I did not. This is my all-time favorite series, and that is book 4 in the Course of Dragon series, The House of Always by Jen Lyons. I think I've rated all 4 books in this series 5 stars, unless Jen Lyons totally drops the ball in book 5. This is hands down going to be my favorite series ever. I love this series so much. This is definitely my winner for the month. Okay, and now we transition into the TBR portion of the month. And the reason for this particular shirt, I like boob books, and I cannot lie. You will see why I chose this particular shirt as we get into it. Now, November brings in nonfiction in November for the entirety of the month. And then about halfway through the month, the Goodreads Choice nominees are released. And once again, I'm going to make my way through the adult fantasy, the young adult fantasy and sci-fi, and middle grade. I originally was like, you know what? I don't have any plans for November. I'm going to go full bore on the nonfiction. And then I saw some of the books that I think are going to make it in the Goodreads Choice Award, which you'll see in a moment. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do as much on the nonfiction front as I thought I would have. I still have 4 books picked out, which I will talk about in a moment. I have my regular list ones that I'm making my way through. I have starting a series, finishing a series. I have my Buzzwordathon and my 23 and 23. Now, thankfully, because it's just 23, there is 1 month out of the year where I can have just 1 book instead of 2 from that list. And this is the month that I have chosen from that, because one of the other books that I have on that list is the Sword of Gaigan, And you will see why I'm not going to attempt this in November. Getting to those books, what I have done in an attempt to maybe get ahead of the list and maybe get even closer and not be carrying on trying to finish these lists into December after voting has closed is to try to look through various prediction websites, use different formats to try to get to that point. The problem is not very many people do predictions for young adult books or for the middle grade books. So it's kind of a shot in the dark. For those, there are some assumptions that I have for young adult mainly, and a few maybe for middle grade. But the thing about middle grade is I can read those a lot quicker, thankfully. And unfortunately, Goodreads likes to combine those with children's books, and I'm not going to read the children's books because I do not feel qualified to evaluate those. So I'm trying to front load it in that attempt. And there are several books that a lot of people are mentioning that they think will be on the list. And based on what I know of, the predictions, and doing this the past couple of years, I think they're right. But it's a little bit scary because of the size of some of these books. So let's get into the ones I know for sure that I'm going to read this month. And we'll start off with one that is like, why did I leave it for this month? Malice by John Gwynne. This is the last of my 10 series to start in 2023. And of course, this is the last one. That being said, I know I just said these are the ones that I'm absolutely going to read in November. This one may get pushed to December. We shall see, because I still do have December to start these series. That's why I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room and said 10, not 12. The one that I am absolutely going to read, which will help me finish a series, Discord of Gods by Jen Lyons. As you saw in the first half of this video, all 4 of the previous books have gotten 5 stars. If this one gets 5 stars, I don't think there's ever going to be a series ever in history or yet to be published that is going to be my favorite and dethrone this. We shall see though, but this is definitely going to get read. On a much easier note, we have my Buzzwordathon book, and I believe the word was good. And so for that one, I have one of the good ones. It's not easier as of content because I think this is really hard hitting, but as of length, and it is young adult. And for that reason, I did choose The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I can't talk today. I'm trying to film a video. But anyway, as the 23 and 23 book that I'm going to read this month. All right, so there are my obligation reads. Now for the nonfiction that I would like to attempt in the first half of the month. What I did is I went through all of my book of the month books, which I have rearranged so that I have the stack of the books that I have read so far, read in October over here displayed. But I went through and I picked out all of the memoirs that I had on that shelf. And I had a lot less than I thought. But the good thing about these is that most of them are smaller. And I'm really intrigued. I really enjoy or appreciate the memoir format. So I'm going to be reading these. I may dive into some memoirs that I have on Scribd that may be on the Goodreads Choice Awards list, such as the Jill Duggar-Dillard's book. I have that on Scribd. I also have Britney Spears' latest memoir. I may read those instead of these, but the ones that I have from Book of the Month are While You Were Out by Meg Kissinger. I believe this is a 2023 release. It just says memorable memoir, so let me look at the copyright page. Yes, this is a 2023 release, so who knows? It may be on the list. Then we have Beautiful Country. This I do not think is a 2023 release. No, it is a 2021 release that is also a memoir. Then we have The Beauty in the Breaking by Michelle Harper and Emily Ratajkowski, My Body. This one is especially short, but this hopefully will help me fulfill my really strong desire to read more nonfiction. And once again, I'm not going to be going through all of the trying to fit the prompts that Olive from a book Olive puts up for nonfiction November, but I am going to make an attempt to read even more. Now that brings me to what I am trying to do to prepare for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I think that I have I think 5 more books on reserve at the library. I don't remember whether they're adult or young adult. I think they are young adult, but I don't remember which ones they are. Obviously, there are going to be more books than the books that are listed here once the nominee list gets published. Before that goes forward, I am going to say, if there's a Jennifer L. Armentrout book, I'm not reading it. I am not reading the sequel to Fourth Wing. If Goodreads has a romantasy category, fantasy romance category this year, and they put Fourth Wing in it, I'm going to be really bummed that I spent time reading that book, because we all know that if it's in the regular fantasy category, it is unfortunately going to win, even if it is by no means a good book. Setting that aside, I even lost my train of thought. I got myself so distracted. What I mean to say, there are going to be more books than the ones that I talk about. These are going to be the ones that I attempt to get through, because I am fairly certain either that book or its sequel is going to be on the list. And I want to get set up better, so at the very least, some of these books, the sequels, the ones that might be actually on the list, I would be able to read either towards the end of November or in the beginning of December. My stack for adult fiction, you can see in the corner here. My stack for young adult fiction, I don't think I've read most of them, but I have read more of them, at least on the prediction list, than I thought. And at least one of these I'm really, really excited to read, because the other two books that I've read by this author, I love. They've been 5 stars. And so I'll mention those. I have Divine Rivals. This is the Fairy Loot edition with these gorgeous sprayed edges. I will definitely be reading this one. And then the one that I have known for quite some time is going to be on this list, and it is way, way too long. This book is 775 pages long. Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. Yeah, I'm going to be reading this. I've had all year. This published in January. I knew it was going to be on the list. I just had to motivate myself to read this. At the very least, I do not have to read the other two earlier in the series, because I have already read those. Okay, so now we come to the adult fantasy. And I have these stacked roughly in size order, makes for a more stable stack here. And some of these I will mention, obviously, at this point, the nominees have not been released. So I'm not 100% sure on whether or not these are going to be the nominees. Sorry, I did a quick camera angle adjustment there. But I will mention the ones that I am almost certain for sure are going to be part of it, and ones that I wouldn't mind reading and that might be on the list. The first of those that I'm almost fairly certain is going to be on the list, and even if it's not going to take that long to read. Definitely the shortest, and that is Thornhenge by T.K. Fisher. This is not only a shorter book height-wise, but lengthwise as well. It is less than 116 pages, because that was the acknowledgements. So this is definitely going to be easy to read. I loved Nettle and Bone last year, so I'm really looking forward to this. Then we have one that I'm not quite certain is going to be on the list, but they have seemed to include some sort of Greek myth retelling. And after reading Ariadne, as talked about or in an earlier or later video, depending on when it gets published, she published Atalanta this year. Again, it is shorter, and I just realized it is a 14-day loan. So I'm definitely going to need to get to these two sooner rather than later. So this one I'm not 100% sure is going to be on the list, but it's short enough that I'm willing to read it and help myself out. Then we have one where I wasn't necessarily interested in the book ahead of time. The original of this was one of Fairy Loot Adult's first books before I got on to the subscription, and the sequel has come out, and I've heard really good things from a lot of different people. It wasn't necessarily something I was drawn to, but when a lot of people were talking about the second book probably being on the list, because that one has gotten rave reviews this year, I decided to put it on. And that is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, and the sequel, The Shadow Cabinet. I will definitely, in the first half of the month, be prioritizing Her Majesty's Royal Coven, maybe trying to get both books read, because I just saw that they are both 14-day loans. So I'm gonna need to get a move on, because I probably won't be able to renew these. Then comes one where I do not have the sequel, the one that's likely to be on the list. That may be one of the other books that I have still on reserve at the library. And that is She Who Became the Sun and the sequel, He Who Drowned the World. This one, I believe, was on the list not last year, but the year before. I wasn't necessarily interested in it, but I wasn't reading that category of the fantasy awards that year. Otherwise, I would be in better shape. So now that He Who Drowned the World is more than likely going to be on the list, I'm definitely going to be reading this one. Then we have a couple of books that I really wasn't interested in at first, especially the cover of the second book, which is interesting. Thankfully, I don't have to look at the cover while I am reading the book. I won't be looking at the book at all because I have audiobook versions of both of these, which is one of the really nice things about some of these longer books, getting the audiobook version. And that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I've really enjoyed what I've read of the Grishaverse. And the whole idea of dark academia and urban fantasy, it's not necessarily something I'm 100% drawn to. And that's the thing with these Goodreads Choice Awards. When I'm reading through these books, I always hope to find a book that's an unexpected favorite. But I know that this is a popularity contest and my tastes generally do not run to the most popular of books. So I'm expanding my horizons, trying to come up with something, maybe taste something that's like, oh, I wouldn't have read that otherwise. I do enjoy this. So that's what I'm hoping with Ninth House and Hellbent, the rather interesting cover. This one did come out towards the beginning of the year, but has gotten a bit of resurgence later in the year. The next one I'm really excited for because I read the prequel series earlier this year. It was a 5-star series for me and I really enjoyed it. And this long-awaited first book in the sequel series has finally come out. I did not have to wait that long because I had just read the series this year, and that is The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. This is huge. So big. But I read through A Conjuring of Light, which I think is the third book in the previous series, really quickly. And even though this is over 640 pages, I don't think it will take all that long to read. And I'm really excited about reading this. I'm just getting to it a whole lot sooner because it's V.E. Schwab. It's more than likely going to be on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. There are probably going to be some others on the list, but one that people are talking about a lot as being on the list that I didn't realize would be on the list, but as I talked about, like, oh yeah, it will be, is Massive. It is a prequel to another equally massive book. And although Samantha Shannon says that you can read them in either order, I don't think I can do that because one was published before the other. And that is The Priory of the Orange Tree and A Day of Fallen Night. These are huge. Absolutely massive. Over 800 pages. That's A Day of Fallen Night, and Priory of the Orange Tree is also over 800 pages. Do I necessarily, if A Day of Fallen Night is on the list, do I necessarily need to read The Priory of the Orange Tree? No. Am I going to? Because I am a completionist. Yes. There are probably going to be other books that are going to cross my radar this month for the Goodreads Choice Awards list. There definitely are going to be because I haven't talked about any of the middle grade books. I'm wondering, I have Chalice of the Gods, but I know that Rick Roy didn't have any books last year, but after the year before that with The Daughter of the Deep, he requested that his books not be put on the awards list anymore. I don't know if Goodreads is going to honor that, but I have Chalice of the Gods. I don't know necessarily of any other books that are going to be on the middle grades list. I hope they're going to make it to first, but who knows? Obviously, there are going to be middle grade books on here. Obviously, there are going to be more young adult books. And even though I have a massive stack for the adult fantasy books that I need to read for this list, as people were going through the list, I've actually read a lot of them that are probably going to be on the list. And I think the book box subscriptions that I have, primarily fairly adult, because there are a lot that were mentioned on there that were on that list, like say Witch King or The Curse of Saints, which if I'd had to read them for this, I probably would have been utterly disappointed. It would have felt like a waste of time. Not Witch King. I really enjoyed Witch King, but The Curse of Fates, not so much. But there are several of those in the more fantasy romance genre that, because I've kept up with Very Lewd Adult, I've actually read. So we shall see how this month going into December goes. Obviously, when I get to my December TBR, that TBR is going to be focused on finishing whatever Goodreads Choice Awards nominees that I have not gotten to, as well as finishing any of the other books for my lists that I need to finish. When you think about the fact that that I read so many books a month, and there are still so many on lists like these and piled up behind me that I haven't read, it's kind of incredible. This whole closet is full of books that I haven't read, and yet I read more than 20 books a month. Mind-blowing. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.